and break up the ones that don't do the right thing. And if they break the law, charge them as lawbreakers. But we need to do better for community lending so that the cost of borrowing $80,000 is not the same for the bank as the cost of borrowing $8 million. That's hurting a lot of small businesses today. It's hurting a lot of young people who want to take out their first loan. So she said, let's go back to community banking. Now, can we do this? You bet we can. I want to show you something. See, I don't believe the total fault of what's happened is just Wall Street. You know, they were the most visible actors in the financial crash. But don't forget, before the financial crash, most Americans were living on less money than they were making the last day I was president. Before the financial crash, all our growth, because the government had no jobs policy, was in consumer spending, housing, and finance. Pretty soon, you run out of your credit cards. You can't max them out but 1 or 2 times. There's no more people to give mortgages to, even if you've already given a bunch to people who shouldn't have taken them. And all the money starts pooling at the top. What we got to do is take the pool money and put it back into the country. That's what we've got to do. Now, should we raise taxes on people in high-income groups? Yeah, including a lot of people who believe that. Warren Buffett says there's no reason anybody who's making over $1 million a year shouldn't pay at least 30% in taxes. They average 17 and 23 for people at incomes of $100 million or more the last 2 years. And, you know, I have done everything I could to make sure my family is right there at the top rate, because I consider it a privilege to live in the United States. I believe for a guy coming from my background, it's a miracle. And anybody that's as fortunate as I've been who doesn't want to pay taxes ought to be ashamed of themselves. And it's not just the finance companies. She's mad at these drug companies taken over by hedge fund people, jacking up the price at 1,700%. Did you see that guy in Congress the other day? Laughing about it. He ought to be run out on a rail. And we ought not to let that happen. She's mad. She's mad about a great American company I worked with to help renovate the Empire State Building. We cut their electricity usage and their emissions by 40%, created 250 full-time good jobs doing it. They were great. They do all these temperature controls, and they guarantee how much you're going to cut your power usage. But their main source of income was as an auto parts supplier. So they go to Congress and say, please bail out the auto industry. And we did. And I supported it. It's a good thing. We don't want to lose those millions of manufacturing jobs and all those people in the supply chain. And they paid the money back. But we saved them too, and they begged us to do it. And now we hear they're going to allegedly sell themselves to a much smaller company, relocate to Europe in a country with the lowest tax rates to avoid paying $150 million in taxes a year. That is the shareholders driving out the interest of the customers, the employees, and the communities. The tail has wagged the dog for long enough. We got to let the dog lead. Now, how do I know we can do this? Because I told you we could do it when I came here in '92, and here's what you got out of it. We had 12 years, you remember this, of Reagan and the first Bush presidency, trickle-down economics. It worked best under Reagan because we had never before run big deficits in peacetime and basically cut taxes for high-income people and told everybody things would be hunky-dory. They tripled the debt. We went on a long sugar high. I say that because I stopped at Dunkin' Donuts today. We went on a long sugar high. Now, here's what happened. The gray line is the economy when I served, and the yellow line is the economy when President Reagan served. It says here that the top 20% did slightly better under Reagan, but that's not true. Actually, from 80 to 95%. Earnings were higher by 10% than they were under Reagan. All this is in the top 5%. But look here, for the upper middle class, second 20%, 25% more when you invest in the middle class and grow the economy from the bottom up. The middle, 70% greater earnings limit. The working class did more than twice as well. And the thing I'm proudest of, income growth under Reagan and under me for the bottom 20%, the people struggling to lift themselves up, was 30 times higher under a Democratic president. And And 100 times as many people moved from poverty into the middle class. Now, what happened was we've had two more trickle-down presidents. I felt bad for the first President Bush because he said it was voodoo economics, but then he got on the ticket and he had to serve Reagan's third term, essentially. But look what happened. Everybody lost ground, most of it among lower-income people. Look at what happened under Bush, too, the first time they ever had a chance to go full out. And I left them 3 surpluses and then 1 more for him to work on. Then they did the same thing again with a Republican Congress and a Republican president. Remember that. What would happen in this election if we don't win? And this is basically before the crash. Everybody lost ground, but the poor lost the most. Look, we got to win this election. And we got to make the right choice. I'm for Hillary because she's the best change maker I've ever known. I'm glad Senator Sanders has been in here talking about income inequality. I don't think I've given a speech in the last 12 years I haven't talked about it. I wrote a book in 2011 in the run-up to President Obama's reelection called Back to Work, and it dealt with how to generate employment and reduce inequality. So I'm glad to have it. But the unfortunate thing, I think, is that he's attracted so many, particularly young people and others, who are so attracted to the rhetoric of he knows who to blame. Wall Street caused it all. And we're going to break up the banks, tax the billionaires and millionaires, and give you free college and health care. And really there's not too much difference between the parties, he says. Everybody knows Goldman Sachs funds everything. In that South Carolina debate, he said they even had 2 Treasury secretaries, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. One would be me. The other would be George W. Bush. So under that theory, we had the same policies and got the same results. But my Treasury Secretary was involved in a team that raised taxes on upper income people, on corporations, removed the tax deductibility for lobbying by corporations, and had a tough SEC commissioner who watched the store and was so tough that in my second term, the Republicans in the Senate threatened to defund the whole Securities and Exchange Commission because we were doing our job. So on health care, Hillary says we're at 90%. We've never been here before, ever in the history of the country. It's a seminal achievement. It's easy to go from 90 to 100 than from 0 to 100. And besides, there's never been a health care change that didn't require breaking a Republican filibuster. Not since World War II. Not any big one. Except one Hillary did with Senator Kennedy, and it got more than 2/3 of the votes of the Republicans because we put it in a balanced budget bill. And they didn't want to get caught not being for that. Then there's the problem that this is a very new proposal that came out just before the South Carolina debate. And Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist for the New York Times, distinguished health economist from Emory University in Atlanta, they both say there's nowhere near enough money in here to do what everybody's being promised. It's about $1 trillion a year short. It's clear to me that we ought to go. American people can't afford to wait while we fight over this. We need to get the drug costs down. We need to get the out-of-pockets down. We need to get the policies changed. And we need to make the insurance market work. And we'll get to 100 before you know it. Who's right? I think Hillary is. On college loans. On college loans, he says free tuition for everybody, defined by the cost of going to a state college. Now, you know, maybe New Hampshire's changed, but when I was here, Paul Tsongas and I got over 60% of the vote together because our numbers added up. New Hampshire expected us to follow the basic rules of arithmetic and to follow the adage your mama taught you. That something sounds too good to be true, it might be. So I think that on college loans, Hillary says, I want people to get out of college debt free. I want people, and here's how. Pay the full tuition for middle class and down. And make tuition de facto free for community colleges and all skills training programs that are 2 years or less. There's a lot of jobs out there that pay good living that don't require a 4-year college degree, and we're not training enough people for them. But ask families who have some money to make a modest contribution, no more than a certain percentage of their income. Ask the young people to work 10 hours a week and work study programs. A lot of us did. And ask people in higher income groups to pay their own way. Don't recirculate their money through the government. Use their tax money to build the infrastructure bank, to build the clean energy bank, to put Americans to work in good jobs. Now, I have to tell you, being able to pay for my daughter going to college was one of the great pleasures of my life. And knowing that the money that I had worked so hard as president to get put into the Pell Grant program, the tax credit program, we gave college aid to 10 million more young people. And knowing that that money went to them, the people that needed it, that was America at its best. And that's why I think she's got the better program. So, this is a race because people are really mad. And they're scared of the future. But the problem with being mad is that doesn't get you anywhere unless you've got an answer. We got to move from anger to answers, from resentment to empowerment. And we need a change maker. I think it's unfortunate that we can't have a debate without rancor. It sort of campaign. Anybody that supports her is a member of the establishment, whatever that is. Your governor is a member of the establishment. All I know is the biggest social problem in this country today is this epidemic of prescription drugs and heroin abuse. And New Hampshire is one of the first places in the country to make this miracle drug, Narcan, available all over the state to try to save people's lives. If you know anybody who's died, and 3 children of 3 close friends of mine have died, the people that are on the cutting edge of this, they aren't the establishment to me. They represent the best in America. We need... Look, we all got to fess up here. We got to be part of this. I don't think Carol Shea Porter is part of the establishment. And I don't think she got beat in 2010 and 2014 because people didn't think she was liberal enough. Do you? No, it's because the people that vote in presidential elections, that would be us, are less likely to vote in midterm elections. So we get all these Republican legislators, all these Republican governors, all these Republican members of Congress, and they take advantage of this Supreme Court to redistrict all the congressional districts they can to make sure they'll never lose it. So we all have to take responsibility for doing this. But it starts with the fact that the next president will get between 1 and 3 appointments to the U.S. Supreme Court, and you want Hillary making those appointments. We've got... We have got to overturn Citizens United. And we've got to stop them. We've got to stop them from restricting voting rights. That voting rights decision they made is atrocious. And now, I never thought I would see this in my lifetime. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear a challenge to the one person, one vote rule. Say, oh, maybe we'll only count registered voters. Maybe we'll only count eligible voters. In other words, if you live in a district with big families, you're out of luck. Woe to the Catholics and the Orthodox Jews. It's their tough luck. I mean, it's crazy. Her position is the only thing that's ever going to work is inclusive economics where everybody can participate in our prosperity. Inclusive social policies that pull us together and we don't demonize any group. Inclusive politics which requires you to both stand your ground and know when to find common ground. And inclusive security policies that have the strongest defense, the toughest diplomacy, but make a world with more friends and fewer enemies. And all I can tell you is she's the best change maker I've ever known. And I don't like the fact that we can't have honest debates about health care without anybody who disagrees with the other side being called a member of the establishment. There are a bunch of Arkansas travelers here, just like they were here for me. One of them was our United States Senator. I've known him since he was a boy. His father was a senator and a governor. He gave up his seat in the Senate. He got beat in 2014 because he voted for the health care law. Is his sacrifice meaningless because he supports Hillary? He's just going knocking on doors saying, look, I know them both, I like them both, I work with them both. She gets a lot more done. You ought to be for her. And that's his simple message. And so, you used to have a congressman who lost his seat when I was president, Dick Sweat. He lost it because he voted for the Brady Bill to require universal background checks. Now, has he become a member of the establishment? No. Hillary's opponent voted against it 5 times and voted to immunize the gun manufacturers. We didn't want to run him out of the Democratic Party, but I don't agree with that. But I could have an honest debate about it. I don't have to badmouth him. Look, you got to go out in these last several hours and tomorrow, anybody you talk to on the street, and just ask them, do they want a change talker or a change maker? When Hillary was Secretary of State, she negotiated an agreement with our allies to share more intelligence that has stopped a very large number of terrorist operations. She negotiated a nuclear arms treaty with Mr. Putin's Russia. That is the only thing that survived our attempt to get along with Russia better. They honored it. It took 67 votes to get to the Senate. That's a lot of Republicans. She got them. And it's a good thing in a dangerous world to reduce the risk of nuclear war. She negotiated the Iran sanctions and got China and Russia to agree with them so the UN would impose them on for everybody. I didn't think she could do it, but she did. And they opened the negotiations. And she also tried to make a world with more partners and fewer enemies. 4 or 5 days ago, I got a picture sent to me. It makes me almost as happy as when Chelsea and my son-in-law send me pictures of our granddaughter in the morning. Of this little guy in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. It's a country in Africa you may not know well, but it's basically divided. They're a heavily Muslim population, heavily Christian population, and some animist faiths and tribes. And this guy's running a little shop. It's actually just a stand full of crafts. And he's got a sign hanging on the stand that says the Hillary Clinton shop. He wants her to be president. And one reason is she was a friend to that country without regard to their religion. One reason is the Secretary of State runs the PEPFAR program, which spends your money to keep people alive with AIDS, TB, and malaria. And when Hillary took it over, she noticed that we were only saving 1.7 million lives a year of people with AIDS. She immediately ordered us to buy, it's a drug price problem, just like yours. And she said, the FDA's approved generic drugs for all this, buy them. When she left office, we were saving 5.1 million lives, 3 times as many, and it didn't cost you 1 red cent more. And look, and the thing is, she's always making something good happen. She, as a senator, worked with the Bush White House to get $20 billion from New York, not to rebuild the buildings, to rebuild the lives. I'll never forget one woman she got very involved with, had to have, I can't remember how many, 10 or 11 plastic surgeries just to go on with her life. She was young. She was engaged at the time this happened. Her fiance stuck with her, and so did Hillary. All the way through, she kept up with her, kept in touch with her, and she'll do that for you. She had her back, and she'll have yours. And she made sure the people from New Hampshire and the National Guard and Reserves that were called to fight in Afghanistan or Iraq, when they got home, got the same health care other veterans did. Helped millions of people around the country. She did it with Lindsey Graham. She made sure the government was doing all it could to help people with traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress syndrome. She did that with John McCain. She and John also took reluctant Republican non-believers in climate change to 2 of the coldest places on earth, the northernmost settlement and the northernmost city in America, where they heard the native Eskimos tell them that their way of life was ending. And she just always made something good happen. But she did before. When we were in the White House and health care reform passed, she worked with Senator Kennedy, got the Children's Health Insurance Program passed. 5 million kids had insurance when we left office, 9 million do today. It's an integral part of the Affordable Care Act. She didn't give up. She made something good happen. She went to the House Republican leader, my strongest opponent, Tom DeLay, and she said, Congressman, I know you don't agree with us on much. He said, not on anything. Oh, she said, yes, we do. He said, what do you mean? She said, you love your kids, don't you? He said, sure. He said, I know you adopted those kids. And our foster care rolls are just swelling with children who can't find adoptive homes because parents are reluctant to adopt kids after they're not infants and because they don't want to take kids with disabilities because they can't afford it. So she said, I want you to help me change that. Because if these kids age out of foster care, they got no college to go to, no skills training program to enter, no housing, no nothing. We got to do this. So they wrote a bill. And by the time I left office, we'd increased adoptions from foster care into permanent homes by 65%. She's always making something good of it. And so, and look, this didn't start yesterday. When I met her in law school, she was working in legal services. She took an extra year in law school to study at the Yale Child Studies Center to learn everything she could about children and the problems poor children face. When she came home to Arkansas, she started our first legal aid clinic in the most Republican area of the state. It became wildly popular. When I was governor, she brought a preschool program all the way from Israel that taught parents, even if they couldn't read, to be their kids' first teachers. I thought it was amazing she did this and was dragging me around all these little preschool ceremonies. Keep in mind, this is a long time ago. There was no preschool. There was no kindergarten in most states. And pretty soon this program's in 26 states. There are thousands and thousands of young people today who started school better prepared, learned more, went further, and have better lives today because she always makes something good happen. And so when she got out of law school, she could have gone anywhere, but she went to work for the Children's Defense Fund. And they were trying to prove that the South was full of so-called academies, private academies, that were nothing more than segregated public schools. but they were claiming tax exemptions they were not entitled to. So she posed as a housewife that had just moved to this little town in Alabama. And she said, she made small talk with the guy at the school. And finally she said, look, let's cut to the chase. I just want to know if my child's going to be in an all-white school, yes or no. The guy said, absolutely. She had him. It took a lot of guts 40 years ago to do that. And it changed, and they lost their tax exemptions, and they had to change all their practices. She went to South Carolina to see why African-American teenagers were being housed as adults in prison for years and years, ensuring that they would be ruined for life. And they changed that too. The reason the governor of Vermont endorsed Hillary, the governor of Vermont, by the way, is the only governor in America to try to actually do a single-payer health care system. And when they found it was going to double the budget, he couldn't do it. The reason he endorsed her, the reason the other senator from Vermont, Pat Leahy, the Senate's most outspoken champion of human rights all around the world, endorsed Hillary, is not because they don't like their colleague. It's because they want to get something done, and they know she's the best change maker. That's what's happening. And so, I just ask you to think about this. Go out there and talk to young people. She'd be way better for them. More of them will get college aid. More of them will get good jobs. More of them will get health care quicker and keep it longer. We got to move this country from anger to answers, from resentment to empowerment. And we have to do it together. That's the big difference. So it's not too late. According to what those 65 people from Arkansas told me last night, there's still a stunning number of persuadable voters, both ways. And so I ask you to take these last few hours. I'm honored by your support for Hillary. I'm more grateful than you know. The country has a lot riding on it. God bless you. Thank you.